The U.S. government is now on its 6th day of its government shutdown, and this is extremely concerning, part of which because of what we are being told by the White House. Look at this. It says the White House, mass layoffs will start if shutdown talks are going nowhere. That is concerning because just today we learned that both the parties are at an impasse. They're struggling to find common ground. According to Republicans, they want a clean continuing resolution, and Democrats want to, well, kind of muddy it up a little bit. And that's where there's a little bit of issues. But look at this. It says, White House raises pressure on Democrats if shutdown votes fails. What they're being told is that there will be mass layoffs across the board if we don't reach an agreement. Look at this right here. It says President Trump and Russ Vought are lining things up and getting ready to act if they have to, but hoping that they don't. That was from the White House economic advisor, or the National Economic Advisor, Kevin Hassett. But I want you to listen to what he has to say. Listen to this.
Are these layoffs definitely happening? Because Russ Vought said on Wednesday it would happen within 1 to 2 days, and still nothing.
Well, again, I think that if the president decides that the negotiations are absolutely going nowhere, then there will start to be layoffs. But I think that everybody's still hopeful that when we get a fresh start at the beginning of the week, that we can get the Democrats to see that it's just common sense to avoid layoffs like that, to avoid the $15 billion a week that the Council of Economic Advisors says will harm GDP if we have a shutdown, and also just all the payments for rent payments and so on that people won't be able to make because they're not getting paid.
One thing I want to point out really quick, because we have gone a week. Technically, it's a week, but here's the concern. People are not going to be paid, okay? Coming up, we are going to see workers will not get a paycheck this coming week. You'll not get a paycheck for last week. Okay? You will not. And that's the issue, is that all these workers that should be getting paid will not. So that means their rent is going to go unpaid if they can't afford it. They don't have savings. Their car payment going unpaid. They might not be able to put food on the table. Maybe they can't pay for medications. Maybe their utility bill gets behind. That's where we're at. So even though some people are saying, well, this is just the federal government, there's still a lot more people that are working. That's true. The concern is for federal employees, they're likely not going to go and get a part-time job for the several days or potentially weeks that the government shut down. Instead, they're just going to sit there, wait. Hopefully they get called back in. But now we're hearing that we could see mass layoffs across the board simply because they're trying to save money to keep the essential programs open. That's what's happening. Let's keep listening.
And so I think that we think the Democrats, there's a chance that they'll be reasonable once they get back into town on Monday. And if they are, then I think there's no reason for those layoffs.
President Trump said on Truth Social that he had a meeting with Russ Vought to, quote, determine which of the many Democrat agencies he recommends to be cut. What exactly is the president refer to when he refers to Democrat agencies? I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I guess that's shorthand for the agencies that generally are the favorites of the Democrats. And, I think we've all got our favorite agencies. Like for me, it's the Council of Economic Advisors. I think that President Trump and Russ Vought are lining things up and getting ready to act if they have to. But
keep that in mind, getting ready to act if they have to.
Hoping that they don't.
Republican senators have been expressing concerns about how the Trump administration seems to be targeting funding for projects in blue states. Vought paused funding for major infrastructure projects in New York City and Chicago, canceled money for climate change projects, mostly in states with Democratic governors. Republican Senator Susan Collins said this is not appropriate. Republican Senator Tom Tillis warned it could 100% backfire against Republicans. You must have concerns about the precedent being set here. I mean, government shutdowns are not uncommon, and someday a Democrat's going to be working in a building behind you.
So we'll listen to his answer in a second, but here's the thing. We see this all the time where Democrats had the full power, had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they couldn't get a lot of stuff done. One of the reasons why, and it's not because they didn't have the ability to, they could have done they could have done a resolution. They could have changed things, but they didn't. And part of the reason why, according to reports after the fact, they said because we didn't want to cause issues if, not when, if Republicans were to gain back the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Republicans now have those three. And Republicans are saying, no, we are not going to do things the way they did. We are going to change things the way we see fit. And if someday Republicans don't hold the majority in the House, the Senate, or don't have the Oval Office, well, we'll deal with that when that time comes. But listen to this.
Well, that is exactly what's happened in the past. And but think about the contrast in the Federalist Papers discussion that we just had. Susan Collins came out and she said, I don't like this action that the president's taking. That's the kind of independent voice in the Senate that the Senate is supposed to give. And yet the Senate Democrats are marching in unison towards like destruction, like lemmings off a hill. Off a cliff. And so I think that in the end that it's natural to put more pressure on the states where the senators are being intransigent, so the senators themselves see the costs that they're imposing on the American people. I think that's completely logical.
Okay. She says that's completely logical. Just Republicans are putting pressure on the states that those Democrats are kind of pushing back. So we'll see what happens there. I do want to show you a couple other things though. Okay? Look at this. It says Trump could start taking sharp measures if the government funding bill fails. These sharp measures, again, they're going to be layoffs. They're going to be cuts. That's the concern. Some believe that the longer this government shutdown drags on, this is actually going to open up the door for more cuts to certain agencies. Not because they aren't needed, but maybe they're not needed at that size. Okay, that's what they're asking. That's what they're saying is we are going to see over the next several weeks if certain agencies are able to survive on half the employees, on a reduction of staff of, let's say, 10%. Can we operate with a 10% reduction of staff? If the answer is yes, the Trump administration is going to look at these agencies and be like, well, if you could do that during the shutdown, how come you can't do that every other day? So essentially, there's going to be not just mass layoffs, but these are going to be extended layoffs. These people aren't coming back. But here's something that is concerning. I want to read this to you. It says government shutdown threatens food aid program relied by millions of families. I talked about this last week, okay, but I want to read this to you really quick. It says right here, a food aid program that helps more than 6 million low-income mothers and young children will run out of federal money within 2 weeks unless the government shutdown ends, forcing states to use their own money to keep it afloat or risk it shutting down. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is WIC, Women, Infant, Children. It says right here, the $8 billion special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, also known as WIC, provides vouchers to buy infant formula as well as fresh fruits and vegetables, low-fat milk, and other healthy staples that are often out of financial reach for low-income households. The shutdown, which began Wednesday, coincided with the beginning of new fiscal year, meaning programs like WIC, which rely on annual infusions from the federal government, are nearly out of money. Currently, the program is being kept afloat by a $150 million contingency fund, but experts say it could run dry quickly. Yeah, when they say quickly, they mean almost immediately. It only has enough money for 2 to 3 weeks of funding. That's it. And then it will be done. 6 million families could struggle very soon as a result of this shutdown. So, once we get a little bit closer to some of these programs being in question, which according to reports at the end of this week, that's when it's going to happen. But once we get closer to this, there's likely going to be more pressure from lawmakers that we have to get the government open, because now we're seeing millions of people hurting as a result of WIC shutting down, SNAP benefits here in the future. Okay, SNAP benefits likely have funding for at least another month, possibly 2 months, and then they'll be done. If you see, tens of millions of people not get aid for nutrition assistance, that's going to be devastating. So we'll see what happens very soon. But as of today, that's what we know. The federal government is still shut down. Both Republicans and Democrats are at an impasse. But hopefully we'll get an answer on this very soon. But as of today, that is it. So thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.